Okay, Kelly Justice here with Philosophy Society. So we have a new member today, and I'm going to do a review of why we're here. Why are we here? Okay, so I'll go right from the beginning. Philosophy is defined as the love of wisdom. And traditionally, the methodology would be to use reason to determine what is wise, or that which is reasonable in some ways is wise. But wisdom as a category, I would say, is a broader category. And so the way that we live our life can be wise or not.
Okay.
And we could also say something like the absence of mental illness or managing whatever mental health conditions that we have, because some things may not be able to change. So whatever is within our control, that's wise as well. But to say that, and also in the trajectory of a good life, but to say that like someone is suffering from depression and they want to kill themselves and that's a good life, that was somewhat contradictory. It doesn't really make sense, right? Wisdom is in some ways that which is reasonable, but also there's how we apply the way we live our lives in general, right?
Who makes the judgment of what defines a good life? Is that the judgment the individual would make?
Ultimately, yeah, you have to be able to determine what that is. And that's where it becomes like a practice.
Okay.
So one of my professors in the past said that like I was like, philosophy is a way of life. And he's like, that's profound. You know? I was like, all right. Aristotle defines the good life. There's two fundamental factors, aside from like luck and like being healthy and stuff. He says that it's a life of contemplation near the end of Nicomachean Ethics.
Okay.
Like living a life where you can like think about things and philosophize basically. And the other is to be virtuous.
So I want to say, you are definitely going to see me again. So I'm sold.
There you go, buddy. That's awesome. Fucking 100%.
I'm sold already. So yeah, just say.
So, and Aristotle's view of what the good life was eudaimonia, or to live well. And so he has two books. One is called Eudaimonian Ethics, and the other one is the Nicomachean Ethics. It was like a book written for his son or whatever, on how to live your life. And in that book, he talks about like the golden mean. So it's like you can be reckless, you can be cowardice, or you can have courage in the center. And the development of what we would call practical wisdom, according to Aristotle, is learning how to apply these virtues within specific situations and getting feedback from our environment and then adjusting such that when we are attempting to be courageous, you know, it's not reckless, for example, or, you know.
Because I would assume the feedback is what helps it helps going over the edge either way, right? One or another. No? Would it be, that's what feedback comes back, because that's what would stop you from being reckless, right? Because the environment would somehow let you know that whatever it is that you're doing is beyond the acceptable limits.
Yeah, it's a continual practice.
Yeah.
And you know, the other notion from Socrates would be reflection, is having some sort of an observation of my past, or it's not an observation of the present environment, but I'm observing my memory, like what happened, you know?
Is there a methodology to the observation of the past?
Reflection? Well, again, this is where it becomes psychological to some degree, right? Because we have so many cognitive biases that we may distort our present perception and then encode an incorrect observation, and then we remember that false observation, right? So that's why being scientific is super important.
It's interesting to me. I don't think a memory with prior knowledge or with future knowledge, I don't think that memory is real. I don't think it's real. I think some of it is. I've been in a little situation where I've regretted a decision I made in terms of work, but it's only because I know the things I know now. But then it's hard to make a distinction of how do I look at that decision and look at it at the point where I was and trying to block out everything I know in the future. So that's what I'm saying. To me, it feels like once you've made a decision or you made an action and then you look back on it, it's not the same thing. It's as if it's whatever it is, you're making it up. No.
The memory itself?
I think you're making it up because then you are bringing other things into it. It's hard to it's possible, but it's very, very hard to put yourself in the same place you were, right? And I think that's what regret is personally,
Okay.
right? Because it is you're bringing everything else. You're bringing the time beyond that decision. It's interesting because you would have lived those processes without ever thinking those are the things that are going to be regrets in the past, right?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So one is that our memories are always created in the moment.
Mhm.
It's not like a computer where they're stored and the exact copy is brought to the present, right? When it comes to regret, like I think it's important for us to like define it. And one working definition could be something like, I wish I would have done things differently.
The reason for the line of questioning is I've been trying to practice a way of looking into I've been trying to make my experiences my treasure, and I want to be able to cultivate a way to look at my past without feeling that emotion, because there's a lot to learn from your prior actions. There's a lot to learn from your experience.
Mhm.
So the need or the goal is to be able to look at that experience, but without some of the finicky little emotions that you feel same place, right? If you look at a really painful thing, it's for me personally, it's hard not to experience those things again and again and again.
Yeah.
But then sometimes these experiences you need to look at objectively and then learn from them, right? So
This is a beautiful thing. You're touching on something beautiful here, you know, like
when I
it's,
was asking if there's a methodology of reflection, what I was looking for is there a way to look, reflect, but then they tell me meditation is the way, right? I've read some couple of that say meditation is the ability to like look at that feeling that it does up and then just watch it pass.
yes.
But then what I really want to do is to be able to look at my life thoroughly, the good and the very, very, very bad parts. But I want to look at them honestly, right? Look at them honestly because there is where the real lessons lie. But then there is where the real focus or the real things that drive you off, right? Those are the passengers you have and those are the predilections you have. I want to be able to look at it honestly and learn from it.
Mhm.
But then the
Imagine
standing
stuff.
the standing preposition right now is to shy away from it, because if you look at it and it's a bad time, then you feel all those things again.
So, okay, part of the thing is that if we didn't have those experiences, we could say that we didn't learn from whatever it is was going on, right? So those negative emotions in some ways will motivate you to like not make a bad decision again or be weary of certain kinds of relationships or certain kinds of people, right? Now, for about 9 months, I meticulously read an entire book to the group called Feeling Good.
Okay.
And this book is about cognitive behavioral therapy. And the author, David Burns, teaches how to identify cognitive distortions in our automatic thoughts or the way we look at the world. And the reason I'm identifying this is because when you say, well, when I reflect on a memory and I get negative emotions from that memory, and then you say, well, what's the right way, or is there a methodology to reflection, right? Well, part of it we could say is, well, we don't want to be distorted in how we perceive experiences or how we remember experiences. So if I, like I said before, if I'm biased in the way that I'm experiencing something now, and I encode that experience in a biased way, and then I later remember that the biased experience, then I can bring that bias or negative emotion to the present. And so that's not necessarily constructive.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm just distorting myself over and over and over again. So one example of a distortion is all or nothing thinking, right? So if you say, or if one says, it's either I'm going to have $1 million or I'm going to have nothing. I'm going to be completely poor, you know, or right? Either you pay me $80,000 a year, or I'm not going to work a job at all, you know? And so it's not really looking at the gradient and like a spectrum of income in this specific example, right? And then the person would be removing themselves from growing and like climbing an income ladder, for example, you know?
That's all other thing. I think that brings into graduality. I think patience is a thing. You know, it's interesting. I'm finding the real wisdoms of the world are the cliches. Really, everything that's ever been said has always been true. Patience is a virtue, is something that's very true. Planning, patience, taking your time, right? In terms of income, right? 0 to 100 is the modern way of thinking. That's the classification, you know, because it's kind of hard to work hard for it when every day the people you idolize are on the phone, right? They all got it so easy. It seems so easy.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. Just to say, like, wisdom has always been wisdom, and everything that's been drummed up over and over and over again remains the same. It remains true. That's what I've seen.
Yeah. So I think that like you're identifying specific principles or values that for you, you've observed they've resonated through your lifetime,
Yes.
and you're like, hey, like this is clearly a truth here. Like I keep this in the pocket. Like
No,
it's just,
it's true, but I've done a bit of extensive reading and extensive looking for certain things, just in my creation of my experience, and I've read different books, and all in all, in actuality, it's a different method, it's a different ideology, but all in all, when I think about it and I curate them, once I'm speaking and I'm coming to a conclusion, it's all the same thing.
That's good.
It's different paths, but everything is the same.
Okay. So, all right. So what we want is some coherence here in general when it comes to these principles we're plugging into life, and we would want those principles to be kind of universal, that they work in any instance that is similar.
Fair enough. I think that's fine. I think principles are okay. I mean, I think if you're going to teach something, there needs to be a specificity to it. But I think anyone can just devolve and apply to their own lives. But I really think education is, right? It's a structure. And I went through many years of school, and I did not live. I left it with a structure, with a way of thinking, but then the real education and the real trick is how do I apply it in my own life? But then you should be able to formulate it in a way that makes sense to you, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I'm a little bit against the group, the idea of fitting in per se.
Sure.
I mean, because at the end of the day, it really is.
Well, there's some. Sorry.
Doesn't matter who you have. Like you could have a lot. At the end of the day, it really is you. Like, the bathroom is you. The mirror is just you.
There's some fundamental problems with like groupthink and conformity, just for humans, and that goes back to our biases again, right? And so you, like maybe you have like an instinct to be averse towards that conformist kind of perspective, and that makes you an independent thinker, which is super useful and important.
Yeah, I think we're a social, right? We're a social species. There's nothing wrong with being social. I think there's nothing wrong with being social as long as you're aware. That's it. I think it's easy to walk around because as I've looked at awareness, as I've walked in awareness is hard. It's a hard thing because then you realize every experience has to be measured, right? Everything that comes in once in a while, that's where reflection comes in. Once in a while, you have to look at the things you're allowed, right? It depends on the period. That's everybody's choice. But then once in a while, it is a good thing to look at things honestly and then review what you're letting in, which is also where I'm saying I want to be able to look at the past and not be able to feel those emotions, right? Because if the last 6 months were hell, I may not want to sit there and look at them.
So part of it is breathing through it. Like it's the way our brains are processing this information, And the other thing too is the narrative. Is what is the story we're telling ourselves about this experience? And have we gone through the distortion checklist to remove out any perspectives? And when you do that, so Burns, what he would say is that we have automatic thoughts, and sometimes those thoughts are distorted. Like if I make a mistake and I'm like, oh, shitty fucking driver.
Yeah, I get it. But then, something to be said about what you say, right? You hear all the time and what you say is true, but it is true.
It's just that automatic thoughts are not necessarily always true.
Yeah, no, they're not.
The first thing that comes to mind. Because how it got there could have been some person saying mean stuff to you as a kid, and then it just kind of got recorded in the brain, and then you just are saying it to yourself now, right, wherever that is. Or you heard it from somebody or it happened, so how it got there, we may not know specifically from a causal perspective, but if I know that it's there, I can observe the thing in itself and assess it for integrity. And so part of that process would be critical thinking. Right. So is there any fallacies in the reasoning process? Like in the statements I'm making,
But then to think of fallacies, you have to know what fallacies are. Right?
That's why we're here. That's part of the practice.
I mean, people do still take thoughts as if they're real things, right? Not a lot of people identify where thoughts come from. Not a lot of people, a whole lot of the population that I know for sure they don't know that thoughts, what drives them, right? We tend to think thoughts are exactly who we are. In conversations about religion and intelligence and access to information, and then believing it, and then, society or whatever that culture says about this particular topic, right?
Mhm. So yeah, like the thought is there's the brain, the processor, and the mind, like an operating system, and then thoughts kind of go through this dichotomy between the mind and the brain. And so the thought is different than you. Your identity as an individual is different than the thoughts that you may be generating. So for example, like people that are suffering from depression, or someone that has anger problems and gets mad at people all the time, right? If they have a thought like, this person should have done this, right? It's like, well, the reason that they were late was because of whatever's going on. Maybe they're just simply their life isn't together right now, And so for them being late, it makes sense that they're late because they need to for them to be on time is to have some sense of balance. That
maybe they were late because something happened. Or maybe they're just late. It's an interesting conversation, and I'm finding there are no real answers to these things. Unfortunately, and I said I'm a big fan of awareness. I'm a big fan of awareness. As I have gone through it, as I've tried to look at it myself, as an educator as I am, as I've tried to find answers of how to live properly. Because there's only one life, and I think getting all that. And I'm finding it's a whole mixture of things. It's experience, it's privilege, it's access, it's where you're born, it's the community, it's culture. It is just a mess. It's a mess of things, right? But then, certain things I'm able to be here, I'm able to read, I'm able to have this conversation, I'm able to come here, right? Worked up the confidence to come here. To show up strangers, right? That's something that was worked on for many years, or something that I had and I built on. The point is many people don't have this, and many people won't. As we're having this conversation, many people won't have this conversation ever. That's your life, and most people won't ever to think to have this conversation.
Well, there is cognitive capacity. Like some people, another way to say it is intelligence, but some people may not be able to process language in the same way that you and I are using these words.
Fair enough.
And that's not a judgment on their value as humans. It's just the capacity. Like if I'm able to jump a certain height,
true.
Or if someone can like do a squat faster than me, that's just like agility. It's like their physiological capacity, right?
It's not a fair world, right? Well built differently. It's not a fair world.
Yeah, it's not even about fairness per se. It's just like there's limitations, and the reason it becomes unfair is because those certain individuals won't be able to gain certain levels of well-being, maybe because they'll repeat the same kinds of mistakes.
Is a beautiful thing, but it's also a burden as well. Like if I was happy the way I used to be, then I would be fine, and I wouldn't want anyone to tell me any different. It's only that I knew I was unhappy, right? That I built whatever systems I had or whatever that led me to this conversation, right? But then there's some other person who's listening to this. It's nonsense.
Yeah, and for those people, they may be more hedonistic. Like maybe they just drink and they eat good food and they have sex and then
they're happy.
That's it.
Maybe they're happy. All I'm saying is maybe they're happy and that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's just that like what happens though is because we're human, right? If you're not mindful of your diet, if you're not mindful of your alcohol consumption, if there's other kinds of addictions that get in the way, it does affect your well-being, whether you're aware of it or not.
That is true. I mean, the real trick is when it starts affecting other well-beings, right? That's the society thing. But I'm a big proponent of leaving people alone, honestly.
Sure. Yeah. Like it just like, I guess I'm not saying that we need to impose restrictions on individuals from a well-being perspective.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I'm sorry, this conversation has gone so many places. It's about that, right? I think you and I agree on ideology, and I'm sure you know way more than that.
I'm not saying that either.
I'm saying it. I'm comfortable in saying it. Okay. You have a degree. I do not. I read a couple of books.
That's good though.
But I've been using it for a long time. What I'm trying to say is honestly, it's each his own. And I think maybe from a subjective point of view, or from a methodology, or from a school of thought, it's easy to say this is the virtuous way, this is the best way,
Okay.
especially if you're living the benefits of that way, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea of it's good. So, oh, I work out, I look good, right? I'm healthy. That's the good way, because then everybody else should get in that way, right? Long-winded, I'm saying is it's okay to let people alone.
Yeah, like again, like so for example, like just outside this building on Victoria Street, there's a bunch of people that suffer from substance abuse.
Yes, I live on jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah.
Right? Like downtown, there's a lot of that.
Mhm.
And like to completely leave people alone, I think that giving people an opportunity for growth
Mhm.
and for well-being, like a water fountain,
Mhm.
like the philosophy society is like the water fountain of life in some ways. I don't know. That's what we're going for here. Whether I'm successful, different thing.
Mhm.
And like that's one thing. Imposing like a tyrannical, like you must live this way, you know, and if you don't, there's this like thing that's gonna punish you, i.e., God. Like that's like really, like couldn't you just be nice and just say you can do it if you want, or you don't have to? You know what I mean?
I think my true problem with a lot of things, and some of the things, all the things you're saying are correct, like from society. My true problem with this, and it's more of overview. It's more of a deep thought. It's always society that makes a decision of what's appropriate, what's not. And all I'm saying is that's dangerous one way or another, and it will always be dangerous.
So like a great example, right, is like how do we define mental illness or mental health?
Yeah.
And then what you do is you have a profession of individuals,
Mhm.
like a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist, and they are licensed, they are condoned by society
Yeah.
to involuntary hospitalize somebody.
Mhm.
They can take somebody out
Yeah.
and put them in like a pseudo jail with a bunch of other individuals that are condoned by society to like keep this person in a room or whatever, put them in a straight.
Yeah.
Or like the practice of prefrontal lobotomies, you know, many years ago,
Yes.
right?
It's one of many. Nice, like that.
And so what gives these people the right to say that a specific behavior, and you gave the criteria as long as it doesn't harm others. So when we put that criteria down, that's important because it is segregating a whole section of behavior that is bad, right? Like like a random fact, like, yeah. So there's a certain percentage of like sadistic serial killers in the world.
The overarching is all I'm saying is as long as it's a group of people who decide what is wrong or right, there will always be a proponent for taking advantage of it. And that's a statement that I think will always be true. But that's a statement that I want recognized in everything that we do, no matter how good or well intentioned it is, and no matter how correct it is.
Any system.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's
all the things you said to listen, I don't want to what's running around. Okay, I don't want that.
good.
The idea is the same. I'm saying whatever it is, whatever prevails at the time, there will always be expectation. That's really my problem.
Yeah, and Plato talks about corruption in the Republic. Like that's a big part of, you know, like what do we do about that? You know, and how do we create a society? And to say that there is no corruption, is there a way to structure a social system that doesn't have it? Like we have the punitive retroactive justice system, like when people commit a crime and are convicted of that crime, then they get punished for the crime.
Yeah.
Whereas my approach is like, is there some way that we could be more proactive in our relationships with each other and prevent things like mental illness and like prevent criminal acts from happening, as many as we can. Because when you look at people that are actually charged with crimes, many of them, like I would say like near 90% have mental health issues.
Yes, true. And I would argue many of them don't know any other way of living. But then that's some of these things have been created in that manner, right? Some of these things have been created so those people don't know any other way, or people don't believe any other way. There's a time where certain people couldn't read. And if you smart enough to understand why reading is dangerous, I read, all right, and I understand why people don't want other people to read. Because then you get a little bit fucking dangerous.
Yeah, it's just the power issue again.
Yes,
right?
That is
certain people.
Something right there. It's the power issue.
Certain people in power don't want to lose power, and it's a misunderstanding of the appropriateness of power and how it's distributed within a group. Like if there's like 10 apples and there's
Yeah.
3 of us, we each get 3 1/3,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. And I think that's a nice summation of our point to argument to it. As long as power exists and as long as power is apportioned the way I see it being apportioned, then my point will always stand.
So I would just communicate that society or a system, the purpose of that, the purpose of us having an agreement and some integration in the distribution of power or other factors that exist is so that things are fair, and fairness, again, we go back to the golden mean. If there's like the warrior, right? And then like there's some gatherers. And the gatherer just doesn't need that much protein because the gatherer is not like lifting an axe to kill the bear that's eating people or whatever,
I would say it gives the pretense of fairness is what happens. I
So
would say it gives fairness. I would say it gives the pretense of fairness.
let's at least have the design sound.
Yes.
The application of the thing, and like the way it's being applied needs to be within the design itself. And I'm not going to say that it can never be perfect, but I think that the very practice of having a group that practices reason like this, like that's the purpose of what I'm trying to do here. That in itself is the thing that will ensure the safety of the individual and of the group. Because no matter what occurs, even if it's some form of groupthink or some social phenomena that's engaged in conformity or some other bias, we can at least observe the phenomena and say, what is that? Self-interest is important. It's important for us to take care of ourselves. And that's basically what it means to mature as an adult.
Yes, I mean, I think adulthood, I don't want to quote somebody famous, but whatever, I won't say that quote. In adulthood is just the realization nobody knows better. Right?
Is it though?
No, in terms of you, yes. The day I left my mother's house is the day nobody could practically tell me what to do. No, if I'm here, I could be doing anything.
In that
Who
sense,
knows what I'm going to do after this? Like I live alone, I work. So in essence, no one can tell me what to do. You know who can tell me what to do? Society's rules.
Sure.
Because I can't go out there and do something else because I know the punitive for that, right?
Yeah.
But then when I say I'm here for myself, I think everybody should be here for themselves. The idea is to be able to create an experience where you know everything. And then that's when empathy and understanding that when you're moving, you're not moving alone. There are other people there, you have to consider them, right? That's what society is.
Sure.
If it's 11 o'clock on a weekday, don't be blasting music or trying to sleep. Right? That's the same application throughout.
Well, I would say self-interest is integrated with group interest.
Yes, it is.
They're not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not.
And there's a degree of awareness, like the removal of a solipsistic, I'm the only thing that exists, like childlike mentality, to being aware of the other minds and,
When I say I'm here for myself, what I mean is I'll always be aware for myself, and then the protection will always be for self. Right? The first instinct will be to protect myself, right?
Yeah.
Yes. That's what social creatures. There is something to be said about being part of the community and having healthy relationships, and and meeting like minds. That's okay. But then I think the real creation should always be, what am I doing? Right.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, but then it depends. Like it depends on who you are. Then that's when individual comes in, right? If I'm for myself and I'm a psychopath and I'm killing people, that's when society takes that bit and say, "Hey, no, we don't do that over there."
See, but what is our response to the psychopath that wants to hurt others? I met one 2 weeks ago.
Did you?
Wanted to fight me. Like tried to, multiple times at this dance party.
Oh yeah.
And so. Like this person admitted in cold blood, like beating up many people. And I was like,
that's a job for the law.
But like, what would we say to this person? Like, because this person has gotten away with it. So the law is not
true. Yeah, you can get away with it. I don't know. I think personally you can say,
or what do they say to themselves? Like, how do they stop themselves from doing it?
I mean, once you've gotten away with it, I think that's it. But once you got away with it, then you'll do it again and again and again, and then you start. Then you rationalize it. Then you start believing that I'm smarter than anybody else, and that's what living in your own head does. If you have done it many, many times and there are no consequences, and you wake up and you're still moving, then you will sure think you will do it one more time. It's just the way it is.
It seems like an addiction then. It's its own way, like this kind of sadistic, callous individual, whoever that person might be, right? They get off on some kind of activity.
Yes, it would be an addiction, right? It would be no different for me going downstairs and getting a pre-roll and understanding it's a good feeling, and then tomorrow I will have no consequences for that action, right? But then I think when it's something that subverts society rules, I think there is more enjoyment to it, right? That's why every generation has its fuck you and fuck whatever you want me to believe in.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a certain enjoyment in that thing. But that's a scary one. That's a scary one. It's a whole other mental side of the brain and human beings that I want no part of or no discussion.
Well, they're out there though.
Yeah, I mean, if I see them, I run away. That's
Yeah.
your choice.
I get it. Well, as much as you can, like.
And that's the beauty of privilege, right? I'll just wall myself in places I know they can't access. And I just realized I have no way of knowing that. True, anyone can be something. It's be a rich one.
I guess. I think there's degrees of like, there's some may be malicious, others may not be.
And some others just manageable.
Yeah. Like the point I'm trying to say here is like, when you talk about the corruption problem, and you talk about like taking advantage of the system kind of thing, you're talking about social rules. And then we could idealize it and say, well, we should figure out the perfect system.
Yeah.
You're like there's always someone that will fuck it up somehow or take advantage of it, right?
It's a little point to the bigger picture. If you say it as if it's a little minute thing to the bigger picture, the correct one is if it's a little pebble in the ocean, but it's true. And it'll always be true.
So my point, or
that's someone's life, that's people's lives, right?
That's
a whole generation of people that gets ruined by that fact. It's easy to dismiss it.
The person that is taking advantage of the system, that like the thing that you're saying is it will always be present. I'm saying, well, what can we do about that?
Oh yeah, okay.
Right. And so I give the example of this guy, that one that was trying to fucking plug me, right? So there's one right there. And so if you look at it like an addiction almost, in the sense that like they don't have self-control.
Yeah.
Even if they're like, yeah, you're probably right, they do it anyways.
Yes.
Right? It could be substances, gambling.
No, addiction is a hard thing.
Shopping. That fucking guy.
Yeah.
Right?
No, addiction is a hard thing to do.
And so the self-control factor is like one property, right? So there's one property would be like the linguistic comprehension. Do I understand why this is wrong? Like ethically. Like I can see someone get hurt and I'm like, oh, and I can have mirror neurons and empathy. But then there's like the abstract calculation, like, oh, I understand why it's wrong to do X without even experiencing it. And this individual, whether or not they have that abstract comprehension part, the self-control thing is really I think one of the properties, like when we define addiction, like substance use disorder, like self-control is like the main issue, is that they can't tell themselves to stop. So if the alcoholic has like one beer, so go to the LTBO, I'm only going to have 2 beers today.
Yes. I've experienced that. I've recently quit drinking. I've quit drinking. And it's an interesting one because I do go out, and the moments where I'm given, I go to a lot of networking events. I like this one, and they like have some idea of giving people free drinks for some reason. And there's a moment where I'm handed a ticket, and I know for a fact that I could have that drink, and no one would ever know. Like I'm in a space where nobody knows I'm quitting drinking. Nobody knows why I want to quit drinking, and I'm looking at it, and I'm saying it's just me here, right? And to put it away is interesting. It's a victory for myself, but that is to say, it's challenging. True. The real healing of any kind of addiction is that person needs to have an opportunity, and they need to say no, and they need to say no by themselves, right?
And this is the thing. So remember we said outside the building on Victoria Street, there's like a harm reduction center kind of area. And there's people with substance use disorder just there perpetually, right? Like they're always there. It's like their home, you know? And some individuals that their cognitive capacity is limited, they may not be able to break the cycle. You know, maybe it's not possible for them. Like to be realistic, like if we looked at like data, and we said this person with this cognitive makeup, and they had an addiction, where do they end up? You know? Okay. And so.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. So trying to catch it early kind of situation.
That's one thing. right? And that's a proactive approach. So if there was some kind of a methodology or awareness that was taught early on, and then we noticed someone had a propensity that they're a predisposition towards any kind of a negative outcome, we could maybe put them in some kind of program, like you become a monk. That's the.
Let me ask you a question. When you're thinking of the solutions, what are the applications? When you think of in a perfect world, what do you think? If you're thinking of screening, if you're thinking of saying, okay, if this person has this kind of qualities and we put them together, and we have a look at them, where is that application in your mind?
So like emotional intelligence. So self-control, like I know there's some issues with Daniel Goleman's research, but that's one of the 5 properties of emotional intelligence that he identifies, like the major categories. And there's a classic study called the marshmallow test, where psychologists would give children that are like 7 years old a marshmallow, and then they would say, I'm going to leave the room.
Yeah, I've heard about this thing.
And if you wait till I get back, 5 minutes, you'll get 2 marshmallows. And the kids that were able to distract themselves, like they would like not look away, they had to like get out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, right? Those kids had a higher success rate in school, their jobs, and relationships when they were older.
Yeah, it's that gratification, right? Yeah, delayed gratification.
Right? And so we would say that if these people, for whatever reason, whether it was like genetic or it was their upbringing, right? They had higher self-control. They may not need an extra course where they actually learn techniques at a very early age that they can practice throughout their lifetime to when they're older, when it's like legal to drink, for example, they would practice those self-control techniques. They would maybe learn deep meditation. They would learn breathing techniques.
I hear that. I hear what you're saying is to try to catch it early, right?
Yeah.
My real question is your implementation for the whole world, or is it for where you live?
Of course, everywhere. Different parts of the world have different issues, right? Like Canada.
I think you might have faced some challenges of application or apply.
Sure.
Yeah, which feeds into my point as well.
Well, so, okay. If there's states of civilization or society that are more, or they're able to accept this kind of a like educational paradigm easier because they're like not at war, for example. Like Ukraine currently is having a little bit of a tussle with Russia.
Yes, exactly.
And so for them, sitting down and maybe it is a good thing to actually learn these things and certain psychological skills or whatever.
Right. Disappointed. I feel for those people. I feel for those people because I do believe this is we're witnessing in a few years, in 20 years, people will ask what happened to those people and why they are whatever they will be. We're living in a time where we see it live. So just we'll pause there and say I feel for those people, honestly. It's not a fun thing to go through.
So in a state of crisis where your life is under threat, or like Israel-Palestine, Palestine-Israel, like if there's like people killing each other, or anywhere in Africa, or anywhere like with Taiwan and China, if something happens with that, right? North Korea, South Korea, any of those kinds of contexts where people are like dying, your basic needs and the way that like your fight survival mechanisms are being engaged, maybe multiple times a day. It depends on the environment that you're in. So sitting down and reading Plato,
yes,
or Marcus Aurelius may not be the first thing to do. So, but there would be some things that the human mind can do in those contexts that might not be as relevant to the monotony of our, sophisticated capitalist Canada society, Toronto, whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean? Because buildings aren't falling on you, right? That's
no buildings are falling.
That's a lot. But the common factor here is that we're all human at the end of the day. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, what your ethnicity is, you're all human, right?
With all the same capabilities, right?
Yeah. And so
mine is the same.
So when we look at the causal factors of like, we have Putin disseminating propaganda to the Russian people and then taking control over one of the largest nations in the world and then using that to oppress and kill another nation. Fundamentally, we don't really want tyrants just doing that kind of a thing. That's a problem. And the solution comes from within the community of Russia. It's not the world or NATO versus Russia. It's Russia and the world, right? And North Korea and the world displacing these tyrants and making sure they never get in power again. Like the humans are together, and it's the psychopaths that are in control for whatever reason, right? That thing got on top, right?
Yeah.
We got to make sure, hey, this doesn't happen again. And in our democratic societies, we've kind of figured it out a little bit. We're like, okay, we figured some shit out, right? Over there, it's, unfortunately, it just hasn't happened yet. So one thing that is good is this critical thinking, philosophical approach, because whenever the propaganda machine is spitting itself, like if I watch CNN and there's facts, and then there's like a whole bunch of people's like projections on these facts, all of those projections are meaningless. I don't care what this military analyst thinks is going to happen in 3 months. You're just trying to fill up airtime. What's important, though, is that Putin has recognized that there is attacks within Russia from Russians, because that's what he said. What other people's opinion on that is a different factor, right? So learning to watch the news and differentiate between what is quality information versus what is so probabilistic or opinionated, it just doesn't really matter.
I think somebody just got sued saying stupid shit.
Oh,
the truth is.
Like Fox News?
I don't want to say anything.
Or Tucker Carlson?
Whoever they are. I think that's still on the air too, right?
Tucker, I think he's on Twitter now. I think it's fine for people to have free speech, but there needs to be some regulation on like misinformation and that kind of thing. And propaganda.
I think I hear you. I think I hear your points. I hope mine is coming across. But I think there's been many men like you over time. Always you're thinking of whatever you're trying to do. I don't know you personally, right? I just mentioned, but I think there's always a subset of thinking that is familiar to this. And the thing is, it's existed for a long time, right? And we're still in this mess. And I think it'll exist a long time after we're gone. And it will still be another mess. That's really why I stand in the big picture of things.
I'm very optimistic.
I'm at the position of saying I will learn, I'll be aware, and I'll safeguard me and whoever is within my sphere of influence, whether I want to or not, because you can't really control what you influence, right? And I am happy with that life. I think that is a good life, the way I want to live it.
That's good.
Right? I just don't want to be out here fighting big fights like you. I think it will kill me, because I don't believe it's going to be.
And almost killed me a couple times.
Yeah. And I think it's going to.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Still a good life.
It's you. I'm just saying, I'm happy you see it. And if I know the comet is coming and I can delay it, one day when it gets here, I'll be happy knowing that I saw it all along.
Yeah, I'd rather just become Superman and punch that comet out of the sky.
I think you won't be able to. I think even if you are Superman, you will get there. One of these days, there will be kryptonite in there. It will get a little smarter.
That's okay.
Because the comet is self-inflicted.
Sometimes there has to be a man that dies to save the world, and that's totally fine,
And that's where we differ. I won't die for the world, because they'll forget that another schmuck will be out there in 100 years doing the same thing.
Yeah, but we're all going to die anyways.
That is true. That is very true. And I would have died living this way.
That's okay. You do that.
Yeah, there you go. I think I'm all talked up.
So the approach is, this is the justification. And I recently wrote a paper, you can read it, what we did talk about last week.
Okay.
That if we learn these skills, right? Well, an easy example is just looking at the analogy of religion. Religious groups have survived for a long time.
Yes.
Right?
They will continue to survive for a long time.
Judaism, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, Hinduism, lots. And Buddhism. And so we know that social groups can maintain their integrity to some degree. Like there are some changes within these scriptures and stuff like that, but they kind of maintain some consistency because the divinity says so. Like it's like one of the first things you do. It's like you do not change these
I don't know
rules.
if you want to say divinity in quotes, but you might not survive the night.
Okay.
I think something might strike you down.
Let it strike me down. So basically, we know that these social groups have, like humans, can congregate together, right? And then they can survive. And there's some improvements. There's some benefits to them. Like there's some sense of morality.
Absolutely. I believe the benefits of religion are massive. It's actually, if I believed in it, And if I had seen its intention being as it's being stated, then I would think religion is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's actually, it would be one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
It's cool.
Mm.
I have a different view.
No, you heard my premise, right?
What was the premise?
The premise was if it was as presented in the
Oh, if it was, sorry, I
if
missed
it
that
was
part.
as
Thank you.
presented
Thank you.
and if it was actioned the way it is presented, then I would believe. And if it was actually how it presents, then religion is a beautiful thing because it's the ability to place your hold and trust somewhere.
Mhm.
But then it gives you confidence because you can walk towards those things with the idea that someone is out there. If you're doing things correctly, you will get them, right?
Yeah,
Just my argument is don't place it up there, just place it here.
that's
You
cool.
can do the same things, just believe in you,
Yeah,
other than placing your trust somewhere else.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just believe in you, right? That other portion, that trust, that belief, that safety that you get from putting somewhere else, just put it in yourself.
Mhm.
That's what I believe.
That's great.
But another point I'm saying, if it was as presented as the good books say it is, multiple of them, then it would be such a beautiful thing.
Well, I would reword it. I would say if it was as intended by some,
Yes, as intended by some.
because the way it's presented, falls back on intention.
Yes, as intended by some, but as believed by many.
Hmm.
As if it was as believed by many, oh man, it would be hell. It would be the only thing.
Sure. Yeah.
It would be the only thing any of us need. Any problem we just talked about, it would be the only thing any of us need.
If it was real, it would be even better. Like if it was like if God really existed and just did stuff like a genie, like we have that movie Aladdin for a long time, and you just did stuff, boom, right? But we don't live in that world. Like we
So
live in-
if that man was up there and he was carefully, I mean, I think he would have left the world by now. No, it's been a long time. I think he would have solved every problem.
there wouldn't be problems.
Yeah, true. They wouldn't, because he would have gotten to most of us by now, right?
Well,
You
we
would
just
think.
God would be like
But
the
then
air.
does time work differently up there? You know, if we can create this, then he could just stop time and solve all our problems.
There's not even an up there. It's just all one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there wouldn't be this distinction between free will and the existence of
Yeah,
evil.
then I would wonder why he made me an atheist, right? Then whatever would happen. But then if he's up there, then whatever would happen would be within his plan.
Yeah.
And then all of us are fine, right?
Yeah, except for that person who's burning alive in some building right now. Like, how's that part? That sucks for them.
Yeah, but then that's his plan. Right?
It's a shitty plan.
It's all,
Like when the psychopath goes to like heaven, did the psychopaths they just get the kill out of all the people they want, or they become one of the pitchfork guys in hell and they're like,
I
"This
mean,
is
I
great."
don't
Like,
know anything about heaven. I would have to talk to God.
Sorry.
His rules for heaven, right?
Yeah.
But then if it's indeed everything's within his plan, then you would assume those people are part of his plan. And if he was thinking it through, you would think he has a plan for them. Maybe he has a place just for them, which makes me wonder why he didn't make a place just for them here.
Yeah, there's a lot of like this is the problem with this story. Is
I don't know. I want to be clear. I do not believe it.
Yeah.
In any shape or form.
Yeah. So going back a few steps, when we look at the even though there's many inconsistencies within all religious dogma, humans have been able to hold on to this.
Yeah, yeah. No,
And then
I understand.
Part of their identity, they have groups, and then they've survived.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And so there's some social psychological property that is underneath all of those religious groups that allows for this to happen, right?
Yes, yes.
And so that is like a natural force in the cosmos, in social cosmos.
Yeah.
And so what if we just took away the appeal to authority? We took away the dogma / faith, right? And the scripture and the practices was learning things like critical thinking instead of appeal to authority, right?
Yeah.
And learning philosophical principles instead of the scripture, and learning morality and ethics, and practicing that frequently so that it becomes a socialized norm. And if you do that, then it would be very difficult to disseminate propaganda to a large group of people.
It would be. It would be. It would be. It would be. But then that's a world of independent thinkers. It's a world of very, very dangerous people.
There's really dangerous people. What are you talking
I mean, it's dangerous to people. It's dangerous to whoever is benefiting from the current status quo, right? As we talk about not allowing people to read, it'll be dangerous, right?
about?
Because I don't know, the status quo I believe is beneficial to certain people. Certain people do hold all the keys. So the idea of religion or whatever I believe in it, I believe is you need those people, right?
Mhm.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I know a man who said if you wanted to make money, you should start a religion. And he actually started a religion that I believe makes a lot of money.
Yeah, like the point is just to take these mechanisms and then orient them in a way
Mhm.
that you invert the problem of power,
Yes.
and then you make it a form of empowerment. Again, it's educational and it's social, and the hypothesis is simply that if the people with the capacity to see that, and then those that don't, they can just conform to the ways themselves.
Yes.
Right.
I want what you have knowledge-wise, and I want it for myself and whoever is around and whoever I'll affect. I will not be preaching it.
Just you using it and acting that way is good enough.
You know what? It just might be. It may be the best way to do it, in my opinion.
Because it's like a domino effect.
Yes, it is. No, it is a domino effect, right? Because if I was going to have a child, it's going to be a relationship, whatever, it breeds, right? It breeds. I say there's many men like you, and you are there because there were many men like that, right? It is a generational thing, right? That's why you're quoting Plato. That's why you're quoting whoever you're quoting, because they existed, because they expounded those views. It breeds, right? That's what humanity is. Humanity is it's a curation, and it's an after effect of people before us and what they believed and what they laid in wait, right? Who says AI doesn't exist if the computer was never found? It's all the same thing, right? Every day we're living, whenever it is we're here, whatever we're leaving behind is the grasp what's to come, right?
Yeah.
Whatever we're doing, whatever our major breakthrough was at the time, when the new generation picks it up or whatever wave comes, it becomes a build and a build and build. And that's what makes humanity nuts. That's what makes it the apex of this maybe little planet. Because, I don't know about other places. I've never been there.
Let me know too. So the approach for the Philosophy Society is simply to have this meta.
Is the conversation usually like this, or is it just because I'm here and I'm talking to you?
This is where I'm just talking with you right now.
Okay.
A lot of the times I'll do like a kind of like a lecture, or we'll go through a book.
But I came on a good day.
Yeah, it depends on who's here, right? Because I change it relative, because it really depends on who shows up.
No, fair enough.
And so the thesis behind the Philosophy Society is to use these forces within social groups, but in a way that promotes independence and critical thinking. And then I think because when you look at the problems within government, the problems within the individual for mental health, the solution is almost the same. And so the way to do that is just to create an institution, an educational program that just teaches that stuff.
Yeah, true. No, true. A lot of the things I've learned by myself, if I had been in a place where I think they had been taught, but not only taught, but taken seriously. You know what I mean? I learned there's many, I think in between the many subjects I've learned, that learning about the thorax of an insect, I think somewhere along there would have been faced with this type of education that would breed this type of conversation early on, to at least make it normal and to make it and to create a child that grows up knowing those things are real and it's okay to think of them.
I think that would be a great place,
That would be that would solve a lot of our problems.
Right.
That would solve a lot of our problems.
Like going back to the previous thing about the distortion stuff, like how do I reflect on things and the encoding of memories or the way we perceive stuff. If we were taught how to think in a way that wasn't distorted, I wouldn't be programming things in.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't be. But then you would be able to know what you're doing, right? I find a lot of people are just coping. But then when you're coping, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're doing. Most of the people don't know what you're doing, right? Because you think you're coping. But there is no overacting understanding that you're creating a new normal or you're creating something else, right? That's why education is important.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us are unaware that whatever we do is real, and then you're unaware of what you're creating. Most people are unaware of the problems they're creating by the way they're approaching problems and the way they're dealing and the way they're, all that. It is important and it's critical. And I think if I had seen some of these things early on, then you do them.
Yeah, so that's the premise for the group basically.
All right.
And so there's the mental health side where it helps us with that stuff.
Okay.
And then the other side, we can make it very general and just say like the social group in entirety.
Fair enough.
And so like, question me, well, how would you solve problems like within Russia? And so, or just to give like a little challenge here.
Okay.
And so a solution for that would be like, well, we would need to, any group that has these issues of propaganda, whether it's China or Russia, first, you're going to have some sense of freedom of speech and information distribution, and for people to actually get together and practice this stuff. But the more that people are able to go through these things and create communities, right, the more that they can, as a group, non-violently just disagree. Now, the problem within like places like Russia right now is you can go to jail for disagreeing with the war.
Was actually, I think jail is when they're being nice.
Yeah. So, certain areas like that, there's going to have to be some kind of a revolution or, unfortunately, a civil war to change the what is acceptable.
Yeah.
And the rights that are enforced there. The right to free speech. Like it's like we take that for granted in Canada, right? And in places like China and Russia, it's not. You're not really allowed to do certain things. So. Yeah. So, as in the West, we can support people like, in those areas and we have the internet, we have information technology, and that's a big deal. Like I'm doing the streaming thing right now.
Yeah. Oh,
right.
Is this live?
It's not live. People could join the thing, but it hasn't like prompted me with the,
fair enough.
We want to join the group chat thing, which is totally fine. So it's just, I just started my professor's thing. My professor has that song at the beginning of every one of his videos for his slides, and at the end, funny.
I was just listening to that song.
So that's basically the approach. So last week we went through this presentation I did on the myth of mental illness.
Okay. All right.
And I basically gave like an ethical justification for why it's important for everybody in society. Let me think about like an allergy thing. So I just remembered all my studying, my eyes like watering. I was like, oh my God, I have an exam after it. Yeah. So we went through all that stuff. And so I gave justification for different ethical principles like justice. If everybody is owed well-being, then it's just for you to learn a little bit about how to help people with mental health issues, including yourself. Yeah. That way, when you interact with somebody, you just make them better off, right? Yeah. Right.
You should really aim to leave everybody better off, honestly.
Yeah.
Because if you know the problems you had and you know the problems you're not telling other people, you would immediately know that other people are dealing with a whole lot of shit.
Yeah.
And it's just practical.
And I think that we have because we're all interconnected, we have an internal motivation to help those that we're closest to.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so even if you have some skills and tools on how to respond to them, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
No, yeah. And I'm not about saving the world, as I mentioned. But yeah, I find once you get this start thinking, you don't even have to try.
Yeah.
It's a random question, and then you say something, and people say, "Oh, this is a good idea," right? So there is the idea is enough. The conversation is enough to have it and to have it present and to have an environment where somebody can consume it, because then they have no control how they spread it, like anything else. But if it's a positive thing that's spreading, then that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Even if they're not aware of it, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't want to change the world. I do find myself in conversations where people say, "Hey, well, that was good advice." Okay? I don't want to practice it.
We're just leading by example.
Yeah, but I'm just living.
Yeah.
Right? It's all that information that I've gathered. It doesn't matter what I want to do with it. It doesn't matter my intentions with it. Sometimes it just comes out. Sometimes I think I'm just talking. Right? I can't stop talking, obviously. But sometimes you just have no conversation. Sometimes you're there and you're talking. That's a good idea. Right? It's not even intention has nothing to do with it. It's the availability of it. It's the expression of it, and it is the exposure to it. Right? Same thing as advertising does to us. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, that's the purpose. And I've been working on just some organizational stuff recently. There's a lot of pieces that go together. So I did this for 5 years in Thunder Bay.
Okay. How was the attraction of?
The first 2 years was slow, and then I got a consistent core group,
Okay.
and then it really, really grew.
Right.
And but then I moved here,
Okay.
and I had I did some case studies for a while. I started writing my book, then I went back to school.
Okay.
And then
Are you writing a book? Do you have a book?
so I have a website, and most of the book is written on the website already.
Okay. Yes, I saw the mobile version when I was looking for a number today, so I will find time to look at that.
Sure.
I'm reading a whole lot of things. I'm one of those guys. I want this whole library. See this. I'm just one of those people. Lot in my plate.
That's good. That's great.
This was interesting. You will see me again.
Should we, do you want, or you guys want, are we done for today? Is that good for today?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what time is it.
It's 9:30.
It's 9:30.